In this episode of FullDroopTV, we fabricate a Prerunner bumper for the front of Project F-150 and mount LED off-road lights. FullDroopTV starts now. This episode of FullDroopTV is brought to you in part by KC Highlights.
Hey, thanks for tuning in to another episode of FullDroopTV. Today we're going to add some front-end protection on our F-150 in the form of a Prerunner bumper. Now, when you build a bumper for a Prerunner, it's got to have function as well as look good. And our function's going to come in the overall design that we build into our bumper, as well as the skid plate that's going to be used to protect the front cross member and the steering rack. It'll also give us a place to hang our KC Highlights LEDs. Now, today we're going to be installing these 10-inch light bars, these 3-inch cubes, and these KC Pod long-range LEDs. These 10-inch light bars use a combination of flood pattern and spot pattern LEDs and produce 4,000 lumens of light. Now, these 3-inch cubes by KC Highlights use a spot pattern LED for extended range, and they produce 2,000 lumens of light. Now, the last light we'll be installing on our bumper are these KC Pod long-range LEDs. The housing is made of carbon fiber, so they're lightweight and very strong. And another unique feature of these lights is the reflector that's behind them. It gives KC Highlights the ability to tailor the light pattern that they want, and using two 17.5 watt high power LEDs, these lights produce 3,000 lumens per light. So altogether, with all of our lights turned on, we'll have 18,000 lumens to light up the desert. There's one more thing to address before we start building our bumper, and that's this factory valance. You can see that with our fiberwerx fenders installed, it really doesn't match the body lines anymore because it was never designed to handle the bolts that we have in our fenders. But fiberwerx has a great solution for this. They make a fiberglass replica of this that blends nicely with the ends of their fenders. Now, our bumper is going to be a complete bolt-on installation, but we're not using all the factory locations as far as mounting goes. So we're going to be altering the front of the frame horns here, removing some of this steel, as well as these tow hooks.
Before we install our fiberwerx valance, we wanted to take advantage of all this room we have to cut off the frame horns and remove these tow hooks. Now, when cutting these frame horns off, you could use a reciprocating saw, a grinder with a cutoff wheel. In our case, we're going to be using our Everlast plasma cutter just because it's faster. We're designing our bumper to be a bolt-on installation. That way we have the ability to remove it if we need to, and we also plan on having it powder coated once we're finished. Now, the reason I'm cutting the frame horn off behind this plate is this plate is just too wide and doesn't go with the design of our bumper. So instead of using these bolt hole locations, we're actually going to be bolting our bumper on using existing holes in the frame. We're going to be mounting our fiberwerx valance in two locations on either side of the truck. The first one being directly through the fiberwerx fender where I've already pre-drilled a hole so that way I can mark it onto the valance itself. The second location is going to be the factory valance bracket. Now, I had to remove the headlight to get access to this location. Once I get these holes marked out, I'll drill them and get this bolted on the truck. Now that we have our valance bolted in place, we noticed that we could add a little bit more strength to this corner by adding one more bolt on each side in this location here. Now that we have both of those installed, we can put the headlights back in and start templating our front bumper. When designing the front bumper for the F-150, I knew I wanted to use flat steel plate to land on all the bolt hole locations in the frame. So this is what I came up with. This is the completed passenger side. It's going to bolt through the frame using these two holes here, and it'll also bolt underneath using these two holes here. and this will serve as the foundation for the rest of our bumper. To build the mount, I first started by cutting out these paper templates that I transferred onto steel. Once I transferred them onto the sheet steel, I used a plasma cutter to cut the design out, and using a grinder, I cleaned up all the edges. I needed to bolt them in place so I could take a measurement for the upper and lower boxing plate. Looks like the lower is going to be 26 by 4.5. I've cut out our lower boxing plate as well as laid out the hole location where we're going to be using our dimple dies. Now we gave Pacific Customs a call for their 9-piece dimple die set, which also includes this small set for doing quarter turn fasteners. Now for our front bumper, we're going to be using an 1 3/4 die for this plate. But before we do, we need to cut an 1 3/4 hole. To do that, we're going to be using this hole cutter that we got from Blair Equipment Company that comes in their 6-piece set. Now this specialty bit works 3 times faster than a conventional hole saw. The most common reason people use dimple dies is by cutting this hole out, you're making the panel lighter. And then by flaring a hole, you actually make the entire piece a lot stronger. We're going to tack in our upper and lower boxing plate, then we'll remove the entire mount and finish weld it on the table. We've got our main tube set in position. We're going to make 2 bends on either side of these mounts. One's going to come over like that. Same thing on the other side. It's going to come over just like that. We have our main tube tacked in place. We're going to burn in the top and bottom sections before we move on to our skid plate tubes and our side support tubes. We're going to be mounting a skid plate on the front bumper of our F-150. And in order to do that, I needed a place for the skid plate tubes to land. So I cut out a paper template, which then I cut out of steel and mounted to the front cross member using 2 existing bolt hole locations in the frame. Now I put this tape up as a visual reference so you can see the angle of the skid plate that we're going for. Now once I get these tubes cut, notched, and tacked in place, I'll cut out my skid plate. I've capped the end of our main tube to give our bumper a more finished look. I've also cut and notched this tube here to go in this location to help with side impact support. Once I get these tacked in place, I'm going to remove the bumper and finish all the welds on the welding table. For our skid plate, we're going to be using 50-52 1/8" aluminum sheet. Now I made a paper template that we can lay directly onto the skid plate tubes to give me an exact pattern for what I need to cut out. So now I can take this, get it transferred onto the aluminum, and cut out. We need to position the tabs to mount our skid plate, and the easiest way to do that is to tape the skid plate into position, flip the bumper over, then we can lay the tabs on the back side of the skid plate, tack them in place, and then mark it with a pen so we know where to drill our holes. We got our tabs for our skid plate from Tab Zone, and what we like about them is they come with this threaded insert, so there's no need for a nut. And they also come laser cut in a way that all the tabs stay together, and I just snap one off as I need it. We're using grade 8 hardware to bolt down our skid plate. Now that it's all tightened up, let's get the bumper back on the truck. Some of you guys might be wondering why we put this tube in place and didn't run our skid plate all the way up to the main tube of our bumper. Well, we did it for good reason. We wanted to create a pocket because we always intended on mounting these KC Highlight 10-inch LED light bars in that location. We're gonna put them in here just like that. So once I get these tabbed up, we'll get them welded to the bumper.
Our KC Highlights LEDs are installed and wired up. And speaking of wiring, we did something a little unique with ours. Originally, our F-150 in the bumper had fog lights in it. Since we're not using those anymore, I took the leads that power those fog lights and used them to trigger the relays that are powering our LEDs. And one thing to keep in mind is you never want to run all the power for your off-road lighting directly through the switch. You want to make sure you run it through a relay so that all the switch is used for is just to trigger the relay. Now, with our lighting situation, what makes it nice is we didn't have to run more wiring into the cab, drill holes for other switches. We simply use the factory switch, turns on our off-road lighting.
FDTV Talk is presented by Prerunner Maniac.
Welcome to FDTV Talk, where we answer your questions. And today's question came from Jose, and he asks,
when adding big tires to your truck, do you change the gears high or low?
That's a great question, Jose, and I know picking gears can be confusing. Now, when you add larger tires to your truck, you're effectively raising the gear ratio. So to combat that or counteract that, you're going to have to change the gearing in the rear end or both axles if you're a four-wheel drive. Now, what's confusing is the larger the number is the lower the gear ratio. So in the example of our Chevy Silverado project, we went from a stock tire with a 373 rear end up to our 37-inch tall tires, and we're going to drop the rear gear ratio to 456. This way it'll give us some of the pep that we lost when we added the larger tires. It's also going to help keep your transmission in shape. You might notice that if you add larger tires without changing the gears, you go up an incline on a highway or something like that, you're going to see your transmission downshifting constantly, which is going to overheat and possibly cause some problems. So I hope that answers your question, Jose. And remember, if you have a question that you want answered on air, visit FullDroopTV.com and click on the FDTV Talk icon. The front end of our F-150 is complete, and it's got a real finished look thanks to this valance that we got from fiberwerx. You can see it blends perfectly with their fenders. Now, the bumper that we fabricated for the show here is completely bolt-on, so we'll be able to send it off to powder coating at a later date, and it's still going to provide us with all the front-end protection that we need on this F-150. Now, if we're out in the desert and the sun goes down, we've got plenty of light thanks to our KC Highlights LEDs. And when we were fabricating this bumper, we originally had the idea of using this upper hoop that went on just like this. After we got our lighting installed, we're kind of thinking that we liked it without the hoop, so we want to hear from you. We want to get your opinion. Now you can visit FullDroopTV.com and cast your vote with the upper hoop or without it. And speaking of this bumper, if you like it, you can buy it. The guys over at Vegas Desert Fab are going to be replicating this bumper and offering it for sale on their website at vegasdesertfab.com, and that's desert with a Z. And remember, if you have questions about any of the products that you see on this show, visit FullDroopTV.com. So until next time, we'll see you in the dirt.
Bolt-on installation, and I already forgot. We have that bolted up. We can reinstall the taillights, headlights. We're going to be mounting a bumper, this tube in place, and stopped our skid plate. And
that's desert with a Z.
Vroom, vroom.